All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for coming. Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I saw you guys all saying good morning in the chat. Good morning. Okay, so for today, I want to talk about Unit 3. So that's kind of our goal, talk about Unit 3. So you guys just finished your Unit 2 exam series. Some of you may not be happy with your grade. Some of you may be frustrated with the grade that you got on one or both of the exams, or maybe overall in the class. So the one thing I want to say to kind of encourage you to stay motivated is that for this last exam series for the final exam and for your Unit 3 lab exam, you're going to have 140 questions on the Unit 3 lab exam, and then you're going to have, let me just write this over here. So for our Unit 3 lab exam, we're going to have 140 questions, 140 points. Okay. This will be, the content covered will be mixed. On the majority will be muscles, and then you'll also have models, just like the bones and the models. Okay. And then for our Unit 3 lecture exam, this is not cumulative. So what that means is a cumulative final means you're tested on all of the information for the entire semester. But with this final exam you take in this class, you are not tested on all of the information in the semester. You're just tested on the last information that we cover. So starting with your muscle lecture, and then we'll go over brain and spinal cord. We'll go over kidneys and reproductive. That is all that will be on the final. We're not going to be testing you on the whole semester of information. Does that make sense? So this is not cumulative, and this will be 160 to 170 questions. We'll just say 160. I think last semester was 165, but somewhere around there. So for the rest of the semester, and then you have your muscle packet, which is worth 25 points. So you have another 225 plus points. Plus meaning you still have some connect quizzes that you guys will be turning in, right? So far in the semester, you've had about 430 points. And in the rest of the semester, you have 225. So you actually have more points heavy in the last part of the semester, if that's making sense to everybody. You have basically an additional 100 questions, 100 points, because we have those 40 extra points on the lab exam and those 60 extra points on the final. So if you guys aren't happy with your grade right now, I'll just encourage you, it can come up quite a bit if you perform really well on that final lab exam and the final lecture exam. If you have not performed well on the last two sets of exams, I will just really encourage you that the students that are successful on the final and the final lab exam, the reason that they're successful is because they change their study habits. So you guys, if you have not been happy with your scores, you really need to not just do what you've been doing and try harder. You need to probably make some overhaul changes. So for example, let's say you have been studying the lectures a certain way. Maybe you listen to the lectures for the 2 hours. If they're 2 hours long, you spend 2 hours, you take some notes and you study that way. You're probably not devoting enough time, because for myself, it's not that you have to spend this long, but for myself, it takes me about 7 or 8 hours to do a 2-hour lecture, okay? So you probably need to spend more than 2 hours on a 2-hour lecture. Does that make sense? So if you have a way you've been studying and it's not working for you, you probably need to reevaluate and kind of get back to basics and figure out, okay, where can I kind of overhaul my study methods and make changes so that you can see that reflected on the 2 final exams, okay? So just to give a little recap, Alyssa, you said in Canvas it says 170. Yeah, it could be up to 170 questions, like I said. So that may change by an additional 10 questions, but why don't I just put, I'll write minimum 160. Does that make sense? So it could be 160 to 170. Okay, so you have probably more than 225 points left, but 225 points should be your minimum amount that you have left in the semester. It's just a way to encourage you to realize you have a lot more points left and you have a way to make up your grade. Okay, hopefully that makes more sense. So let's do a quick kind of recap. I'm not going to spend a long time, but I want to do a really quick recap on kind of how I would recommend studying. If you guys, again, aren't super happy with the scores you've been getting, what I would recommend doing, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about Unit 3, okay, at that point. So the reminder that I would say for lecture studying is make sure you guys are preparing really good notes. These are just examples from my notes. I'm not saying my notes are perfect. I'm just giving you guys a reminder of kind of ideas of what you could do. Most people are visual learners. I would encourage you to have some type of picture. You don't have to put them in your notes, but as long as you're studying with pictures, make sure you're kind of making your notes meaningful to you. For me, it's a lot of outline format, writing the main heading and then writing subheadings under it. I like to do a lot of bullets because it keeps me focused when I have bullets. And sometimes I'll write something important on the left-hand column. Those are just ideas, okay? I don't want anybody to feel like there's one perfect way. But if your notes are only taking you 2 hours, my guess is you're probably not putting enough information and effort into your notes. So I will say time is probably an indicator. If you guys are typing your notes, okay, if anyone here is typing their notes and that's the primary way that they're studying, research has consistently shown that you need to handwrite in order to retain information, and typing doesn't activate your brain as much, okay? So if you're someone who likes to type because it's faster, I would highly, highly encourage you. Maybe you type out some type of preliminary thing, but you need to be incorporating handwriting in some format, okay? So I've mentioned before, I think I have an example in the announcements from the beginning of the semester. One of the ways that you guys can handwrite your notes is by creating an outline, right? So maybe you are somebody who enjoys typing and you really feel like that works well for you. One of the ways you can make that work is you can type your notes initially, and then when you go to actually study, you can create outlines for each chapter, again, on a piece of paper. Okay, so you can create an outline for the chapter on a piece of paper, handwritten. So that's what I would recommend doing. I'm trying to see if these are the correct ones here. So this, I don't know if this, will this rotate? There we go. So this is an example of an outline I created for chapter 1. Let's see, this is an example of an outline for chapter 2, okay? This is very basic, meaning all we see here is just the terms. But if you guys remember, plasma membrane broke down into transport and composition. And then we talked about the 2 types of transport, passive and active. And then we broke it down under there. Does this kind of make sense, the idea of creating a concept map? Students have consistently, here's one for tissues. This is really how I do my concept map. So let me zoom in here. Oh, that's a little too close. Okay. So the way I like to do my concept maps, let's look over here, like for skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle, I like to actually write information on there of the basic key points. So for example, skeletal muscle is voluntary multinucleated striated. Dark A bands are myosin, light I are actin. I prefer to put the key terms on my concept maps and not just muscle skeletal. I like to write what are the key things that I need to know for the exam about this. It's not going to be 100% of the information you need to know. However, what's really, really helpful about doing your outline, like you see right here, is it kind of trains your brain to take all of those 20 or 30 pages that you may have just written about that lecture and see it all in one spot, okay? This is helpful whether you've handwritten your notes or whether you've typed your notes. This is a really great way to look at the information. If you guys can force yourself to try this at least one time, I have heard a lot of feedback from students that they find it very, very helpful, and they notice a difference on their exam scores when they use this method. Okay, it's kind of like an active learning tool. It forces you to rewrite your notes. It forces you to organize the information kind of in a different way maybe than the lecture or the notes were organized. And I'll really encourage you that this method was extremely helpful to me when I was taking microbiology, but even more so when I was taking physiology. So this allowed me to plug concepts in on one page. So for example, maybe we were talking about cellular respiration, like how ATP is made in the cell. This allowed me to see all the different stages in one spot. It's not the primary, like first way you do your notes. It's a way of reviewing your notes. Does this make sense to everyone? So this could be really helpful the weekend before the exam, or maybe after you've already completed your lecture notes to study them. This will be really helpful to you in micro and physio, and I have used this as well in nursing school, especially on topics that are kind of more complex and more involved. And maybe I'm not putting the pieces together really well or seeing how this connects. And I have actually made these outlines continually in nursing school as well, depending on the content we're covering, okay? So I would really encourage you guys, try to force yourself to do these. When I was taking anatomy, I really discounted these. I felt like, you know, concept maps, I don't know how to do them. They're probably going to be a waste of my time. And so I didn't actually really use them until I got to physiology. And then I felt really upset with myself that I hadn't tried them in anatomy, because what they did for me in physiology is they took 5 hours of review time that I would spend in anatomy, where I would read my notes over and over, and they cut that down into 1 hour. So it usually takes me about 1 hour to make one of these concept maps. Okay, so they're not a really fast thing, about 1 hour to 2 hours. And in that time, I've doubled or tripled the amount of time I used to spend reviewing an anatomy when I would read over my notes 5 or 6 times. This cut all of that 6-7 hours of work into 1 or 2 hours. So it is going to be a time saver. It helps you with active learning, and it's going to help you connect the pieces together. Okay, so I highly, highly encourage you guys to utilize the creation of concept maps. Again, I've heard really positive feedback from students taking anatomy who have done it. Okay, so hopefully you guys have a little idea of kind of how to do that. I did have somebody, I just wanted to kind of tell you guys, someone in the chat said that they have used these tips and they have been getting A's on every exam in this class. So maybe try it for you again if you're not happy with your exam scores. Like I said, people do have really, really a lot of success using this. So I really encourage you guys to do it, okay? All right, any questions at all on that? Kind of that was lecture. Most of you guys don't struggle with how to study lab, right? Most of you guys have a really good idea of how to study lab. Lab is a lot of repetition. Lab is a lot of doing it over and over again. The one thing I would tell you with lab that students make mistakes on is they either spend not enough time on lab because they're busy. That does happen. But one of the things that I think students do a lot of in this class is they over focus on lab and they forget about lecture. That would be the one thing I see a lot of in students that are very dedicated and do put time into this. They put too much time into lab and they do really well on the lab exam. I hear this over and over. I do really well on the lab exams, but I don't do well on the lecture exams. So my advice to you, start your day of studying. I would recommend studying a little bit every day, or if you study a lot on the weekends, start your time of studying with lecture, then go to lab, because it's easier to study, right? It's just a lot of repetition. And this exam series, we're going to be covering muscles. You do not have access to muscles to take home like you did for the bones. Okay, so no muscles to take home like you did for the bones. However, so there is kind of some good things about this exam. and I'll try to kind of go through it. You do have muscles in the tutoring center. So the Zoom link we're in right now, right, is for the Math and Science Learning Center. That is on campus. You guys should know where it is by now. I told you guys they have the bones there, right? Hopefully you utilize that. If you didn't utilize that, they also have the muscles. So please, please, please use them on the days that maybe your teacher is not in lab. Does that make sense? So you could go on Fridays, they're not open on the weekends, but you can go on the other days of the week and go study the muscles then if you need additional time and you can't stay for extra lab time. For me personally, when I took this class, I always stayed for extra lab periods. So I didn't always have to come on a different day of the week. But if you guys can't do that, make the time to come on a different day of the week so you can get time with the muscles. All right, any questions so far for me? I want to show you guys a few different things. And we're going to talk about the Unit 3 muscles right now. So that's kind of what we're getting into. So again, we know that for the Unit 3 lecture exam, we talked about how to study that, right? That's kind of what we covered, how to study. And we always go over in SI, we cover the outline format. So we kind of go over the outline and the key things you need to know in SI, which is what we will do. We'll do that for the next several weeks until you guys take your final, right? And then I also go over models as we go. So let's now transition, and we're talking about the Unit 3 lab exam. And we know that the main part of the content is going to be on muscles. Okay, you're going to see the muscles tested. Muscles will be tested in two primary ways. Okay, I'm trying to kind of explain this as simple as possible. So one, we will have illustrated pictures of the muscles that you will test with. And two, we will use physical models of the muscles that you will test with. Okay. And then obviously, in addition, there are models. So just like all the two other lab exams, you guys should be familiar with this at this point, but you know that we're going to have like a sarcomere model, a brain model, a spinal cord model. We have the eye and the ear, the kidney models, and the reproductive models. So you guys should be familiar with those at this point, right? You learn about the lecture and then we kind of do the models just like for Unit 2, it's the same concept. So how many muscles do you need to know, right? Because remember for the bones, it was like, I don't know, I've never counted, but I think like 300 different names. And they were all, in my opinion, the bones are extremely hard names to remember, right? Like coracoid, tubercle, and all of that stuff. In my opinion, the muscle exam was a lot easier than the bone exam. I don't want to tell you that that will be true for every student, but most students say the muscle exam and studying the muscles is easier than the bones. So if you felt like that bones were really, really hard for you, the muscles will probably go better, okay? In addition, the muscles have less terms. So I think there's only about 100 and 140, 150 muscle names you need to know versus the bones we all knew were like, I don't know, it was never ending, like 300, right? That's at least it felt like 300 to me. So this is kind of our list. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to learn an arm and a leg, and then we're going to also learn the torso. So arm, leg, torso. That's how we break up the different muscles. You're also, like I said, going to be tested on illustrations, and I'll show you those as well. Any questions so far before I kind of pull up this stuff? I'm going to show you guys where to find your muscle packet as well. So let's start by covering the illustrations. I just feel like that's kind of the simplest piece to cover. It's going to be your muscle packet. So if you guys find, I'm not exactly sure which one of you in here are Knudsen or Bender, But if you find your muscle packet PDF submission, right, if you're a vendor, so find that Google Drive link for your muscle packet. And if you click on that Google Drive link, it's going to give you the muscle packet. And this is what you're going to be turning in for 25 points on the Unit 3 lab exam. So again, this is going to be worth 25 points, and it will also be on the lab exam. It will be tested, okay? So remember, like your cardiovascular lab packet was not really tested on the Unit 2 lab exam. This is different. The muscle packet will be tested on the actual lab exam. Is everybody with me? Remember how your Blue Allen lab book, you had illustrations of the bones and they were not on the test? This time, the illustrations of the muscles, these are on the test. So this exactly same picture that you guys see right here, we color this in and we put it on the lab exam. Does that make sense? So on the lab exam, you guys will have physical pieces of paper colored in, and we'll ask you to identify the muscles. So for example, we kind of all know the chest, right? We all know that this is the pec muscle, the pectoralis major, right? So right here, this is red. So these will be on the exam, oops. Sorry, my phone is, I don't know, my computer's just having problems. Okay, so on the exam, all of these letters here will actually be whited out, okay? Because we don't want you guys just remembering what the letter is and then kind of using that. Does that make sense? So you won't be able to see any of these letters because that's how you'll study those. So these will all be whited out. And then you're going to be asked to identify the muscle, right? So identify the muscle in red. Okay. So identifying that muscle in red, we would know that this would be pectoralis major. And as you guys know at this point, it's going to be multiple choice with none of these as one of the choices. Okay. So this would be pectoralis major. Does that make sense? This exact picture will be on the lab exam, tested. So there are multiple of these pictures. I think you have 13 pages, if I'm remembering correctly. So there's, again, multiple pages here. All of these will be tested on the lab exam. Okay. I'm going to try to go through and make this as clear as possible. It is a little in depth, but I'll try to explain it. So for we'll do a little, how does the test look kind of thing. So test for the illustrations, which is what we're on right now, the black and white, you are asked identification, right? So what muscle is this? Does that make sense? For your homework, which is like the actual packet, you are going to identify each muscle. So that means we're going to label each muscle. So let's just put label each muscle. And then for your homework only, you have a second step. You're going to handwrite the origin, insertion, action, and innervation of each muscle. You are not tested on number 2. Is everybody following me? You have to do this work for the packet to get 25 points, but you will not be tested on the origin, insertion, action, innervation. You just have to do it for the packet, okay? And I will warn you, it's going to take you a little bit of time. So let's go back to our first example and I'll show you what this would look like. So I'm doing my homework, right? You guys can actually start this weekend. If anybody wants a way to get ahead for this unit, I would recommend doing this. So I'm doing my homework. I'm going to label all of these. So let's just pretend I'm labeling each of these, but right now we're just going to do the one I showed you. So pectoralis major. So when you turn this in, you're going to want to label each one. So I'm labeling all 5 of these muscles. That makes sense? We're labeling all of those. Now my step number 2, and you can do this, you can do origin, insertion, action, innervation for each muscle on a separate page. So I pull up my separate page and I'm going to write pectoralis major at the top. And then you can just do O for origin, I for insertion, A for action, N for innervation. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys right now how you can find those. Okay. Is everybody still with me? So in your study resources module in Canvas, it's also found in your module. If you guys go to that, you're going to see a link called the Guide to Muscles. Does everybody see that in our study resources module? I don't want to erase my notes because I'm using those. Study resources module, right here, we see it called Guide to Muscles. Yes, everybody should have that in their study resources. If you guys click on that, it's basically a Google Doc that I created to guide you guys through studying the muscles. This should be all of the same information I'm going over now, but kind of written out and there for you. It has your complete list of the muscles you need to know on the arm, the leg, which we're about to talk about, the torso, and right now what we're talking about, the muscle packet PDF illustrations list. All right, everybody with me? So these are the correct answers to the packet. Everybody hearing me? So if we go to our study resources module and we click on Guide to Muscles, these are the correct answers to the packet. Okay, so you guys can find all of the answers to the packet right here. You can fill in your whole packet this weekend with your answers. What that means is you can study the correct answers faster. Because like I said, we are going to test you on the exam, right, using these same pictures. So you do need to study these pictures and memorize which muscles are which on these pictures. Good? Does everybody get that? What's on the exam is these pictures and you're identifying them. For the origin, insertion, and action and innervation, if you go on the same Guide to Muscles link and you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is a link here that it's not like the perfect link. You can use whatever you want, but this has everything you guys need in one place. It's a link that was referred to me by a previous SI leader. If you guys click on that, you can use the Control F feature, right? Control Find to find your muscle. So let's do pectoralis major. So right now I see pectoralis major right here. And on this bracket here, this is my origin, my insertion, my action, and my innervation. So again, this would be my origin. It shows you tabs at the top, but I already scrolled down. My insertion, my action, and my innervation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand write these things on my paper. Usually when students start to do this work, they start to feel very overwhelmed because you guys have a lot of these you're going to be writing. You do not need to write as much as is here. You can simplify it to like 3 or 4 words. So for example, origin says medial half of the clavicle, manubrium, and body of sternum, costal cartilages of ribs 2 to 6, sometimes from the rectus sheath of the upper abdominal wall. So what you can do is you can do medial half clavicle, manubrium, sternum, costal cartilage. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. That's what all you need to write. You don't need to write all this other stuff. For insertion, you could just write greater tubercle of humerus. For action, you can just write flexes and adducts arm. You could also write medially rotates. So you can really simplify it. You don't need to write as much as is here. We do expect you to write 5, 6, 7 words. Some students write 1 word. 1 word will not get you full points. You do need to write something, but you also don't need to write sentences worth for every single one. Remember, you have about 150 muscles you need to do this on. So the handwriting process takes a long time. I think when I was in the class, it took me like 6 or 7 hours of handwriting to do this. So if you want my advice of how to get ahead in this class, if you're feeling like you really want to do well in this next exam, most likely, since you just finished an exam series, you might not be super motivated. I would recommend doing your lecture notes. And if you want a way to get ahead this weekend while you watch some movies or whatever it is you want to kind of do that's sedentary fun, sit down and write these out, okay? It shouldn't, you don't need to wait for anything. You don't need to know these for the exam, right? You don't need to know origin, insertion, action, and innervation for the exam. In a way, I mean, without trying to throw any punches, it's just busy work. It's just a way to get you guys to write this. The reason is, the theory is that if you handwrite it, you somehow learn a little bit. Handwriting it, we kind of all know we probably aren't going to learn a whole lot, but at the same time, handwrite it and you guys get the 25 points. If you don't do this part of the work, you're not going to get full points. You may get 5 or 10 points out of 25. Okay, so just to get the points, you're just going to be handwriting this. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's what we write on a separate piece of paper. And then what are we, again, what are we tested on? Oh, sorry, wrong thing. We're tested on just the illustration identification. We're not tested on origin, insertion, action, innervation. That's for your homework sake only. I would recommend coloring the packet in, kind of shading in your different muscles. It will help you identify them. And like I said, that is how they'll be on the lab exam. They'll be colored in. So I don't recommend studying these in black and white. I recommend coloring them in. You do not have to color them in for full points on the packet. I just recommend it. Okay, that's what I did personally. The origin, insertion, action, and innervation will not be tested on the lab or the lecture exam. We will ask you the definitions of what they are, but that's for the lecture exam. Like, what is the origin of a muscle? The point of attachment to the bone. Does that make sense? We're not going to be asking you, what's the origin of the pectoralis major on the lecture exam? We're just asking you definitions. For the lab exam, you won't be tested on them at all. It's just for identifying muscles. So the lab exam, we are just asking you to identify the muscles. Good, you're doing this for points. Does that make sense how to study the packet and how to complete the packet? Yes. Good. All right. So we're going to move on to the second part of the lab exam. All right. So that was part number 1. So the first part of the lab exam, like I said, is illustrations, asking identification. The second part of the lab exam is muscle models. These are like physical muscle models. These are pink and red, like pink, red. And you'll be asked on the arm, the leg, and the torso models. And this again will be, what muscle is this? So it's all identification. Finally, you'll have your physical models, like I had said, like you had last time. And this again, for the most part, is identification. Kind of like on the last exam, there may be a few function questions, but for the most part, the lab exam is focused on identification. The models, it's all identification. So let's look at our muscle models. Let me try to erase this part over here. Okay, so for our muscle models, you guys have right here, you're seeing the arm. You guys can kind of see the hand here. This is the elbow. So this is one of the arm models. This is the arm model here that has all of our numbers on it. Okay, so just for an example, right here, you're going to see the number 11. When we go to your muscle packet and you scroll to the end of your muscle packet, at the end of the muscle packet is a list telling you what each muscle is that you need to know. So these are the muscles you will be tested on for the exam. So number 11 is the biceps brachii. Again, if I look here, number 11 is the biceps brachii. Because I see it on this list, I know it will be on the test. Well, it's something you're responsible for on the test. I'll be honest with you, when I took the lab exam, I think I saw every single muscle on the lab exam, okay? Like I said, it's not like the bones. There's a lot more muscles you can be tested on. And when I took the exam, it was actually fill in, completely 100% fill in the blank. All right, so that's your arm list. You're gonna go through your arm that you see here. You guys are welcome to use this Google Drive link, but I do recommend studying these in person because they kind of come apart. If you can see right here, you take pieces off and you see more muscles underneath. So it is a lot harder to study on the computer, and it's a lot better to study in person, kind of like the bones. Everybody see that? And you can take those pieces off. The next part of the lab exam is going to be on the leg, right? So you have your leg here. It's going to be the same thing. You have numbers on the leg. So for example, the number 11 on the leg. And when we go to our muscles of the leg, number 11 is the gluteus maximus. Okay, so you're going to learn number 11 as the gluteus maximus, and you basically just go through the whole leg that way. And then in addition, you have the torsos. Okay, so the final muscles you need to know on the exam are the torsos. They are actually pre-labeled for you guys. So if you look right here, we have a pre-labeled torso. So this is everything you need to know for the lab exam on the torso. And this is one torso we test you with. This is the second torso we test you with. It is not pre-labeled, but you guys should be able to look at it and label it yourselves. And then this is the third torso we test you with, and it is also pre-labeled. Right? And then this little torso is also tested, but it doesn't have as many of the terms. I will cover that in SI as we go on. It's not relevant today because you guys haven't really gotten into the stuff yet, but we will talk about what you need to test on this little torso a little bit later on in the semester, okay? So again, arm, leg, and torso. So test, what is on the test? Illustrations or the black and white pictures asking you to identify the muscle, they will be colored in. That's the first thing. Second thing, the muscle models, which are our arm, leg, and our torso, okay? And then those are asking what muscle is this? And the models for the most part are gonna be identification. You're already familiar with kind of how that will look. You'll have a brain model, spinal cord model, etc. Yes, fill in is easier in a lot of ways with Knudsen. All right. Everybody clear on that? This muscle model right here that you see, this arm, it does not have any numbers on it. So I would not recommend starting with this. So I'll just do a quick breakdown of how, let me see if I pull up one of these. There we go. So how I would study the models. I'll show you guys. I'll just kind of tell you what I did, and I felt like it worked really well for me. I got the best score on any of the lab exams on the final lab exam. Okay, so I did the best on the final lab exam. So how I recommend studying the muscles. So we'll say the muscles, because I'll tell you, I'll just break it down really quick. So for the illustrations, color them in, white out the answers, and quiz yourself. So you're going to probably want to make copies of your packet. So don't color in the one you turn in, make copies and color in a second copy. So make a duplicate and color them in, white out the letters and quiz yourself. Does that make sense? That'll look exactly like the lab exam. We're going to white out all of those letters and then you quiz yourself on that packet. So that's how I recommend studying the illustrations. For the models, start with the leg and work in sections. So what you're going to do is you're going to study the upper leg. You're going to study that for a while until you kind of get the feel for it before moving on to the lower leg. Kind of like with the bones. Remember how you guys kind of learned a bone before you learned a new bone? You didn't try to study all 20 bones at the same time. So for this exam, you do the same thing. Upper leg, he'll give you all of the muscles this time at one time. So it's kind of up to you how you do it, but this is how I recommend. So study the upper leg, then learn the lower leg and go back over the upper leg. Does that make sense? Then go over the upper arm, lower arm, and then go over the torsos. And then each day you're going to keep reviewing what you've already learned and advancing through more terms. After you've learned everything, review it every day for multiple days so you guys feel super, super confident going in and you really feel like you know it like the back of your hand, okay? Any questions at all for our lab exam? No, there are no muscles to take home. These muscle models, I believe, cost like $1,500 to $2,000 per muscle. Like for the arm that you see, that would be $1,500 to like $2,000. So there's no option to take it home. So you guys can study those at the tutoring center. Highly, highly recommend that. Or you can go to additional lab times with other students and study them like that. Okay, so you definitely are going to need additional lab time besides your lab time, or you will probably come close to failing the exam if you only go in for your lab time and nothing else. So you do need to, you have access to the Google Drive link, which is good. I mean, it's better than nothing and you can work on them on the weekends with the Drive link, but you really honestly need these in person to be like super successful on the exam. So we're going to be studying our illustrated packet. First thing you want to do is label your packet and do the origin, insertion, action, and innervation. You get the origin, insertion, and action, and innervation from your study resources module. It's called the Guide to Muscles. The Guide to Muscles gives you the correct answers for the packet. So you can go through and label all the pages that way. Handwrite your origin, insertion, action, and innervation using the link found at the end of that same Guide to Muscles packet, which was found in the Study Resources module. Using that link, you can handwrite all of your different origin, insertion, action, innervation on a separate piece of paper for every muscle that's found in this packet. For studying purposes, you're going to want to make additional copy, color that in, quiz yourself on this packet, and then you also are going to be studying these muscle models in person. If you're curious how much of the lab exam was tested using the physical models and how much was tested with the pages, on my exam that I took, it was 50-50. So every other station, I would get a drawing and then I would get a muscle model, and then I would get a drawing and then I would get a muscle model. Does that make sense? So it was about 50-50. So you really do need to study both. And it will be the same exact pictures that you see here, the same exact illustrations. They're not going to be different. Any questions at all on that? All right. So for your lecture content today, so what I kind of want to know, this is the problem that I'm not really sure. Since you guys had your exam Tuesday, has anybody, I want to kind of get a poll. Is there a way that I can do polls in here? Let me see. No. Okay. Can you guys put in the chat yes or no to whether you've watched the muscle lecture? because it'll kind of give me an idea of like what we should be doing with our time. So yes or no. Even if it's just the first one, if you've watched at least one of the muscle lectures. Okay. So what I'm seeing the majority of you say is no. I've had like one yes. So our first muscle lecture is going to be this muscle contraction lecture. Okay. So would you guys, so because nobody's really done the lecture yet, my belief is that SI is more helpful when you guys have already done it. Would you guys prefer to, let me see, I can go over the sarcomere model. That's one of the things that we can do with our time. So we can go over that. And then, what do we think here? Thinking maybe I'll go over this sarcomere model because that's something that you guys will see in person. And then after we go over the model, maybe we should do an outline for the chapter because I don't really have anything else to do. I will ask you guys, I can put it in the chat. Would you prefer to save the muscle topic for Monday's SI when you guys have gone over it, when you've done it, or do an outline of it today? So I don't know what we can just do, save or today. Write those in the chat for me. So if you want to save it for Monday, write save. And if you want to do it today, write today. Okay. All right. So everybody's with me. Okay. So if you guys could please, I know you were probably already planning on it, I don't want to, but just please watch that this weekend. Please make your notes because then when we come together on Monday, everybody's really getting the most out of it. Does that make sense? If possible, I saw somebody say that if you're in Bender's class, he has not published it yet. So I will publish that. Which chapter is it? I'm not really sure which chapter. Does anybody know which chapter muscles is? In Newton's class, we don't go off of chapters. We just go off of content. So hopefully nobody in here is still reading the book. I've told you guys that that's not helpful. Chapter 10. So the book is just, remember, the book is not really where you should be focusing your time. Just because it's more detail and not focused on what you need. So you guys should have already watched muscle tissue based off of what was in your content week last week. So if you guys haven't started muscle yet, you are behind. I'm not trying to be, it's just the facts. So start that. You need to watch this muscle tissue lecture first, and then you want to watch muscle contraction. You actually should have both of those watched before next week to not be behind. Okay. So I know I was encouraging you guys to do the packet this weekend. If you haven't watched both of those lectures, I would reorient your focus and do both of those lectures this weekend. Good. So have both of those done by Monday. You don't want to be behind. This is a very challenging unit. Next week, you have nervous tissue and brain. Getting behind is not a good idea right off the bat. Watch both of these. It's okay if you don't get the packet until Monday. If you wanted to get ahead on the packet, the link is already available and I've already told you guys how to complete it. Does that make sense? But if you don't feel comfortable doing it until you get the packet in lab, that's fine. You do want to complete both of these lectures though, and they're about 2 hours each, so they should occupy a good portion of your weekend. Good. So make sure you guys watch both of those lectures. Bender, you said Bender hasn't published them yet. Should be able to. No, you guys have, you have about 8 or 9 lectures for unit 3. Yeah, you have about 8 or 9 lectures. I'm just saying that in order to not get behind, you want to watch those 2 lectures before Monday. This is just the first 2 lectures. It's just that you would be behind on your content if you don't have those watched by Monday. Does that make sense? Because you're going to get 2 more lectures next week. So if you only watch 1, now you're a lecture behind. Oh, he might be updating his Zoom links. I'll talk to him about it because I don't want to publish it if he's trying to update his lectures or something. Okay. But I'll talk to him about that because that would be helpful for you guys to have that this weekend. All right, so let's go over the sarcomere. This is going to be your first muscle model. It's going to be a little easier to understand once you guys go over those lectures, but it's not too complicated. And if we have it labeled now, that's kind of one less thing for us to do later. So let's just label it now. You guys do know a lot of the stuff already from Unit 1, okay? So this is going to be your neuron. Remember, the neuron has an axon, so kind of refresh your brain on what was part of a neuron. Remember from that very first exam, you guys had your little neuron with its dendrites, axon, telodendria, synaptic knobs. Does that sound familiar to everybody, our little neuron? So this is the neuron again. This is the axon. Remember, it had myelin sheath that was kind of like this. Hopefully that's ringing some bells to everybody who studied the first exam series, right? So it had our little myelin sheath. This kind of covering that you see wrapped around this is our myelin sheath. This would be a nucleus here. And then remember, our synaptic knobs were the ending of the neuron. So right here, this whole kind of section you see is the synaptic knob. When a neuron communicates with muscle, and we're going to learn about this on Monday, but when you're going to learn about it over the weekend when you guys watch your lectures, right? And then we'll go over it here on Monday. But when the neuron communicates with muscle, it actually communicates with a little area of the muscle called the motor end plate. And the motor end plate is this really wavy portion. And as you can see here, does everybody kind of see this here? That is the motor end plate. Okay, so that's our wavy motor end plate. Good. Then we have our myosin and actin. You guys remember your myosin. That's this dark portion in your actin. So the myosin is this segment. The actin is this segment, myosin and actin. In muscle, we have some unique structures. Again, you'll learn all about those when you watch your lectures this weekend, but you have your transverse tubules, which are called your T tubules. These transport sodium, which you'll learn about. And then you have your sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the sarcoplasmic reticulum transports calcium. And on the surface, you have these little guys, which are called terminal cisterna. They're like little holes. Terminal cisterna are little holes. And together, 1 T tubule and 2 terminal cisterna. That's what I'm highlighting there. So it's 1 T tubule, 2 term cisterna equals a triad. So on the lab exam, if we highlighted those 3 together, which we have done in the past, we would be asking you to identify a triad. This pink covering that goes around the muscle is called the sarcolemma. It is the plasma membrane of the muscle cell. What we're looking at here is a skeletal muscle cell, and that's the sarcolemma or the plasma membrane. Any questions on this picture at all? We'll do one more picture, show you a different angle. Everybody got what's on here? All right. So moving on to our next picture here. So when you're looking at the outside, you see this kind of covering here. Also visualized here, it's kind of like this webbing part. That's called the endomysium. It's the covering around the muscle cell. So this is our endomysium. Okay, endomysium. That's it for that. It's not really anything more, just endomysium. If you look at the top, see the same stuff again. I don't need to relabel it. This is synaptic knob, motor end plate. And then each of these are your, so this entire thing is going to be your muscle cell, or myofiber. And inside the muscle cell or the myofiber are these, each of these round structures is a myofibril. And you're going to learn about that when you look at muscle organization. Myofibril. All right, so we have our muscle cell and our myofibril. Okay. That's everything for this muscle cell model. We call it the sarcomere, which is technically not correct. Sarcomere are the contractile parts of a muscle cell. So the correct name for this model is actually myofiber or muscle cell. Okay, so make sure you kind of make note of that, but you won't be tested on that. I'm just showing you that the whole thing is a muscle cell or a myofiber. For this unit as well, in the study resources module, you guys have a lot of practice questions available. I just didn't want to forget to let you know. So we again have a lot of our different practice questions for you guys this time too. So make sure you take advantage of those as you study. Maybe save a lot of them for before the weekend before, but it's the same kind of thing as last time. We have these really great resources here, these practice questions with their answers that you guys had on the last exam. See if they'll load, because you'll recognize it. It's the one where the answers are all highlighted, right? And then there's some that I created as well. I think it's about 100 more questions that I created in different SI sessions. And I'll probably create more for you guys this time as time permits. Looks like this one we have 70, and it looks like I did a lot of explanations for this stuff on this. 70. And then let's see how many are right here. Another 32. So another 100 practice questions are available there. There for lecture, yes. We don't have any practice lab exam questions for this unit. Just to point out, for this unit, just like last time, every Google Drive link has a video of the previous SI leader covering everything you need to know about the model. So just to be really, really clear, you guys can use these videos to study. They're the same content as before. And remember, you can go to settings, to quality, to 1080p, and then that will adjust the video so that you can see everything in really good clarity of him going through it. You can speed up the speed, or you can go slow, and he's going to point to each thing with the pointer and show you what it is on the list for every model. So these are a really great resource for you guys to use. They're available to you in every model for this exam, as like the last exam. All right, any other questions? I'm kind of winding down. I'm thinking, I know that it's only 10:15. We usually go till 11, but I'm kind of thinking of leaving the rest open for questions. as I don't really have anything in particular to go over since we're saving the content for Monday. Okay, so Monday, be prepared for the muscle stuff. Sarcoplasm on the model. Oh, is that on the list? The sarcoplasm is going to be your, like your cytoplasm. So sarcoplasm would be probably like the area right in here if I was pointing to sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasm, am I thinking right? Sarcoplasm, I don't know that, is that on the list? I don't know that we usually test you guys on that. Let me see. I've never gone over that on this model. Let me make sure. Sarcoplasm is not on this test. Like for this model, we're not testing you on sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, yes. If you really wanted where it would be, it's probably like this background, like this light brown background, but it's not. No, I don't have the screen with it labeled. I'd have to relabel it. But like I said, if you want it labeled again, you can utilize this video and you could label one of your images yourself, okay? All right, I will let you guys go. I will be here until noon. If you have questions, please don't leave. But if you don't have any questions, I'll see you Monday evening, 4:45 to 6:45, okay? Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you guys.